On your feet! Get them going!
Good afternoon. Good evening, good morning, whatever the case may be. Welcome to Cross Examinations Live. I'm your host, Mike S. Miller, not a pastor, priest, rabbi, theologian, online debater, or any of that stuff. I'm just a guy on the internet who draws comic books. I'm turning this into a movie script right now. Oh, man. And I'm here to talk Bible stuff with y'all. Today's topic, objective ethics without God, not possible. Also, I saw Objective Ethics, and he's not a kid. I thought he was a kid. He's got a very, very young voice, but he's not a child. He's not a 13-year-old trying to make his way in the world. Yeah, so I was writing this based on my original treatment, and I excised a big chunk of issue 3 out of it because it's a historical segment. Not that anybody of you care, but it's Kevin Sharp back of the book. Anyways, and it only came up to 64 pages after I wasn't even checking how long it was, and I was just doing it, actually using AI to help me actually formulate some really great choices that deviate from the original, but don't step on too many butterflies and come back. I think, honestly, you know what? This is not the place to talk about that. Time or place. That Shad show, man, that my re-upload of the Shad show. It was a Shad show, I called it, right? Yesterday's show. That's doing much better. Let me click on the thing and see where we're at. We're 219 views on that episode. Maybe people just want to see what Shad was talking about. But the comments thus far have been, a couple of Mormons coming in telling me, how wrong I am about Mormonism. We are saved by faith through grace. Well, they're the ones that add actually Joseph Smith was the one that added after all we can do. And they're like, well, you have a misunderstanding. And then the funniest part was one of these guys. Well, I'm going to open it up so I can read it correctly. One of these guys, he literally says, and I'm sure he said it with a straight face. And I'm not insulting you, but this is how you know. It's like, look, I get it. These guys were raised. Okay, before I say this, so it sounds like I'm being defamatory. I'm not. Everyone is indoctrinated into something. However you're raised, that's how you're indoctrinated. I was raised as a agnostic. I was raised in public school. I was raised to believe that evolution was true. Right? I was indoctrinated. Okay? Mormons are indoctrinated on different theological precepts, and one of those precepts is the leader of their church is a literal prophet of God, even though none of them can prophesy, which is Deuteronomy 18:18, which means you're not supposed to listen to him, and frankly, you're supposed to stone him to death. But that's another topic. They're indoctrinated believing that these people have the absolute truth, and so whatever they say, you're to incorporate into your worldview. So they can say whatever they want, and just like the example of suddenly, and Shad said it was only about 3 years ago, but it seems like it was longer than that. There was a proclamation that, hey, we don't like being called Mormons anymore. We like being called Christians now. And suddenly it's become a thing. And Mormons. They get so offended when you call them Mormons. Meanwhile, the entirety of the existence of their church, they called themselves Mormons. They advertised themselves as Mormons. But this Mr. I Speak for God guy at the top a few years ago said, yeah, we don't like that anymore. And of course his argument was because there's no, people think of us as Mormons, they don't think of us as Christians. They're heterodox. In old-timey phrases, they're a cult. They're a Christian, but they are a Christian cult. Right? It's a cult outside of orthodoxy, or it's a faith outside of orthodoxy, which in the old days, that just meant a cult. I think Charles Manson messed up the word cult for the rest of us. But they are a heterodox, that is an unorthodox, outside the pale of orthodoxy religion, based on the Christian faith. So they're I mean, you'd call them a Christian cult, right? So you would also call them then heterodox Christian. I know people just get, they're not Christians. Well, they're not Orthodox Christians. But you know what? All kinds of people who are not born again, Bible believing people who are part of the body of Christ and the church also call themselves Christians. Cultural Christians call themselves Christians. Hetero sounds okay to me. Am I mistaken? But don't you say things like, the earth is 6,000 years old, snakes do talk sometimes, and men once lived 1 to 1,000 years old. Why is this less crazy than Mormonism? I don't get it. Because I do believe the earth is 6,000 years old, and no one can prove that to be wrong. It could be wrong. I could be wrong. I'll fully admit, Lou, I could be wrong. But you know who was around 6,000 years to prove it? Nobody. Except for God. And God doesn't come out and literally say the earth is 6,000 years old. So while I believe it, I'm perfectly happy saying I could be wrong. Snakes do talk sometimes. Well, on the snake issue, it's just the one snake in the Garden of Eden. And honestly, I'm wondering, because I think we were significantly different before the fall, and I'm kind of wondering whether or not, now this wouldn't account for Balaam and his donkey, but for the snake in particular, I'm wondering if we did have some type of telepathic communication with God, because, God wouldn't have a mouth. God speaks to us very, very, I mean, I don't think it's telepathy in God's case, because he's God and he doesn't have a physical brain that's communicating with another physical brain, but he's probably spoke in some sort of way into the mind of Adam and Eve, which I'm wondering then if that was a thing then. And that Satan, the angels, can speak into your mind. I don't know if they can read your mind. I don't think they can read your mind, but they can speak into your mind and put thoughts in your head. So it wasn't actually a snake. Yeah, it's called a serpent, which, a lot of the dragons and stuff are called serpents. But correct, Dustin. And what was the last one? And men once lived to 1,000 years old. Well, not 1,000, 900s. Well, that's just science, Brooklyn. If we were in a perfect environment, in a perfect world, our body is designed, and you probably know this, for eternity. If it wasn't for entropy and all of the negative consequences of a fallen Earth, Every cell in our body is replaced every 7 years. Our bodies are constantly in the cycle of rebuilt. I guess it's a very simple way to say it, but rebuilding themselves. Every 7 years, we replace every cell in our bodies. We are constantly rebuilding ourselves. So in a perfect environment, or at least in a better environment, we would live much longer. And the ages of the people just declined after the flood. So the environment changed significantly. Why is it less crazy than Mormonism? Well, how many pick a doctrine. Pick a doctrine. And also right now what we're talking about is how they are heterodox. They're outside of orthodoxy. Nobody in the Christian world ever believed the stuff that Joseph Smith and his subsequent quote unquote prophets, who again have never prophesied anything and therefore should be stoned to death. I'm not saying we should go stone them. I'm just saying biblically. If you're going to come in and you're going to claim that you're a prophet of God, you've got to prove it. That's the only reason those books in the Bible exist. It was because the people who claimed they were prophets of God proved they were prophets of God, and therefore people took them seriously. If you don't prove you're a prophet of God, you don't get to be a prophet by being voted up. It's the same issue I have with the Catholic Church. You don't get to be the voice of Christ on earth because a bunch of fallible human beings voted you there. All right. Buddy says the prophet president isn't nearly as unilateral as the Pope, who has to sit ex cathedra to infallibility define something. The prophet has a system of some checks and balances. Well, that's not a prophet of God then, is it? Course Grinder says, how do you know God made everything? No one was around to see it. The evidence that nothing is made that is not made, or nothing makes nothing ever did. So in order to have a something out of nothing, you have to have a mover outside of time and space to make that happen. You don't have to call it God, Corpse Grinder, but we've been over this 1,000 times. Excuse me. It wasn't a literal reptile. I don't know what it was, buddy, and oddly, I don't think you do either. Do you? Do you have some information outside of the ex biblius, or whatever, how you say it? So are Catholics heterodox with all the saint and pope worship? I think so. That's my personal opinion. It's all words of men. And also, Catholics don't mind being called Catholics. This is the argument I was having with Shad. It's like, Catholics don't care if you call them Catholics. Why should Mormons care if you call them Mormons? It's a very definitive thing. Don't try to confuse Mormons, who their unorthodox belief are so far outside of the pale of orthodoxy that you don't even recognize it as anything that the church for 2,000 years would recognize. And of course, their argument, well, that's because this is the thing I couldn't believe. And again, they believe it because their prophets, their presidents told them this is what happened, or Joseph Smith did, or whatever. That Jesus picked the worst possible, and he wouldn't recognize that this is the literal the literal logical conclusion of this doctrine. Jesus really sucked at picking apostles. The Mormon Church apparently is great at picking apostles. They're great. All of their apostles are perfect and pass down their beliefs perfectly. But Jesus couldn't pick apostles who would pass down his teachings perfectly. Joseph Smith was a better prophet than Jesus, because the prophets Joseph Smith picked could maintain a church for a couple hundred years. But the church, the apostles, 12 of them, obviously he picked Judas for a particular reason, but include, you know what, let's throw 13 in there. We'll take Matthias along with Paul. 13 of them. He picked, okay, you know, he didn't pick Matthias. He picked Paul. So out Matthias. He picked 12 apostles who could not pick disciples themselves to disciple and teach them well enough. And for decades, by the way, Timothy was at Paul's side for how long? 30 years? Maybe? Couldn't manage to teach him well enough for him to maintain the same teachings. That's Jesus' fault. He picked 12 dummies. But Joseph Smith, he picked really smart guys who could pass his. This is the logical disconnect. It's like, no. We the church went into apostasy immediately after the apostles died. Okay. The Rome issue is way more complicated than the LDS one. Agreed, buddy. The reason that you can accept these things is the same reason Mormons accept their crazy beliefs. They were indoctrinated and think what they believe is true. Well, the difference being, I trust the Bible because I trust what the Bible says is true, because the Bible has actual prophets who actually told stuff before it happened. It's called prophecy, and that is the standard by which the Bible judges whether or not what the guy's saying is real. So the only thing I trust implicitly, and I wasn't indoctrinated to it, it was a discovery through the research that I've done in those claims, and those claims did hold water. I only trust the Bible. I'm not indoctrinated to believe that anybody saying anything is God on high telling me something is true if it's not in the Bible, or if their understanding of it in the Bible doesn't line up with other stuff in the Bible. Right? That's not indoctrination. Sorry, Luke. Mo and Joe both miraculously were allowed to bang anybody they wanted. Crazy. Yeah, I think we went into that yesterday. Muhammad, and Joe Smith, horny guys who created heavens where they get to just bang women for eternity, which oddly Jesus says in heaven, or in the resurrection, we are neither married nor are given in marriage. The Bible teaches, for the Mormons watching right now, the Bible teaches that in the resurrection, as in heaven, we are like the angels in heaven who are neither married nor given in marriage. Oh, I'm sorry. Does the prophecy proven scripture contradict your non-prophecy proven prophets? See, that's the problem with the indoctrination. Was that, again, they believe these guys without any evidence of them actually being prophets of God. It's just a system wherein, how do you know you're a prophet of God? Because the last prophet said I was a prophet of God, or because some some council of elders declared that I was a prophet of God. How do you know you're a prophet of God according to Scripture? If you say a thing, if you claim you're a prophet and you claim you speak for God, which is claiming to be a prophet. If the thing you say does not come to pass, it's a death sentence. They're supposed to stone you to death. It's Deuteronomy 18. Look it up yourself. It's a death sentence for someone to claim to be a prophet and their prophecies not come true. Joseph Smith prophesied that Zion, Illinois would be their temple, their holy land. Zion, Illinois was going to be their holy land. He prophesied it, and then he said, he called out to all the Mormons in the East Coast and everywhere, and he's like, come, it is time for us to fill the Holy Land for eternity. Whatever, however he phrased it. And then after a little while, he pissed off the local government, and they kicked him out. They kicked the Mormons out because they were doing a power play. They were like marching up and down the streets with like weapons, like they were a little army, looking like they took over the town. And it's like, this is now Mormon land. So they kicked him out, and they had to keep moving west, and they ended up in Salt Lake City, Utah. And ultimately, that failed prophecy. Whoopsie. Well, right there, that would disqualify. But you talk to them more, and they're like, that prophecy's just not fulfilled yet. We're going to take over Zion, Illinois. I'm guessing the people who live in Zion, Illinois are not going to be willing to let that happen. Speaking of cells in the 8 Norton Hulk, it shows the cells dying before they regenerate as the Hulk's cells, meaning I do believe every cell in the body has to die in order for him to change. Yeah, I mean, cells die every day. Cells die every minute. My cells are dying right now, and they're being regenerated. The whole Jesus and Satan being brothers thing is kind of a big issue. Right. It is kind of a big issue. So I had 15 minutes. All right, Justin, you want to jump in here? Justin wants to, I know we got really into here. I'm just going to drop the link in the chat. It's not Open Line Friday, but you can jump in, Justin. The Mormon thing just has legs, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. Let's see where we're at now. 220 views. And that's with the re-uploaded one. So the snake is just an allusion to the devil. But I will say this, it would be more rational to believe in a talking snake rather than believing in unguided abiogenesis. That's true. At least a snake exists. Because you can't get to existence through abiogenesis. Meaning he would have a new body every time to go back to human. Also meaning he should have a brand new immune system, making it easier for him to get sick. Ooh, I never thought about that. Nothing plus nothing leaves something, and you have to have something if you're going to be with me. And you gotta have something if you want to be with me. Nothing from nothing leaves nothing. You gotta have something if you want to dance with me. Isn't it if you want to dance with me? Or is it going to you? Who were God's parents then? Beings don't come from nothing either. No, human beings. God is not a human being. God is an eternal spirit. Now, if you're talking about the Mormon theology, right, God needs parents. And those parents need parents. And those parents need parents. And those parents need parents. That's why an honest Mormon will say They have literally infinity gods. They are the most polytheistic religion ever. And when I asked Shad about that, he's like, we don't know. Bull. I'm sorry, Shad, that was... you know the logical conclusions of your faith. Yeah, he looked... Nah, he looked bad in that moment. I will say, he looked bad in that moment. We just don't know. We don't know is not an answer. You do know. Revelation 12 says the snake from the garden is the devil, right? AI says that 6% of Mormons are black. I was surprised at that statistic. I figured it wouldn't be that high. I know, right? Especially considering they weren't allowed. And they treated blacks then, up until I think 1983, 1984, the same way they treat transgenders today. This is... I so wanted to say that when he was talking about the transgender stuff. Oh, no, transgender is allowed in Mormon churches. They're just not allowed to hold any office. They're not allowed to any teaching or allowed any position of power. And I'm like, that's exactly how you treated blacks up until the 80s. Lou says, who specifically are the true Christians? Where is the true Christian church? Or is it invisible? You're looking at it. Those who truly love Christ and are adopted into his family are the church. The church is literally the body of believers who are saved. That's the church, the adopted. So are there true Christians in Catholicism? Yeah. There's true Christians in Orthodoxy. There's true Christians in all kinds of stuff. Are there true Christians in Mormonism? I don't know, because I don't know how God is going to judge them for believing in a completely different God, because their God is a human being who got elevated to godhood and then right? So our God is the creator being outside of time and space who created everything that ever is, ever was, or ever will be. That's not the Mormon God. So they may call him Jesus, but that's not the Jesus the Bible teaches. So I don't know. I'll just put it out there. I hope and I pray that they are, or that there are. But that's so unorthodox. It is. It's outside the ballpark. Justin the Unicornist, are you here to change the topic?
I mean, I thought this was the topic.
Oh, that's right.
So, I mean,
this was the topic.
This was yesterday's topic, and here we are, not yesterday.
Here we go again. All right. Now I have to admit I have not watched that video. I don't.
Don't worry, I watched it for the both of us.
Yeah. So, tell me why you're here, and what.
Because you hit the backstage button that pulled me on. So. But yes, I watched Objective Ethics' video where he debates Matthew. We'll just call him Matthew because I don't remember his last name. And as like a just beginning, I don't think Matthew's a debater. I don't think he's schooled in debate or rhetoric or anything. True, but I think he has kind of the boomer mentality on how things are. Like they just grew up that way, and that's just how they are. Like there's nothing else to it. It's just I've always known this, therefore it's always been this way, therefore it's the truth. And
indoctrination. We call that indoctrination.
Yeah, in a way, I would say.
If look, I'll just say this to anybody and everybody, including Christians. If you are not willing to skeptically review your own beliefs,
Well, I don't think that was the case. He wasn't being like, it wasn't that he was denying something. He was just coming up with the generic answer, not so much the well philosophized answer or a scientific or a theological answer. He was just giving kind of, because he's a missionary and he lives in Brazil. So he's giving a missionary answer, not necessarily like something you'd expect from IP or something, where they give out like
What's
very
IP?
inspiring philosophy.
Oh.
The guy who debated Justin from
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So like he has a master's in philosophy. So when he talks,
Right.
you're expecting him to be a master at philosophy because
Right.
he's got a master in philosophy.
Right.
So
whereas
this guy
I am
doesn't.
not a pastor, priest, rabbi, blah blah blah.
Apparently, you skipped that today. So, but no, I don't think Matthew has that kind of back history or studies those types of topics because he just believes them to be true, which he's, again, not wrong for believing them to be true per se.
Right.
But it's just the way he presented himself probably wasn't what you'd expect. It's kind of like if you put two people in there who aren't like trained in debate having a debate and then being like, oh yeah, there's a massive debate going on. I was like, not really either of them.
You want to address this from Lou?
Oh, I got notes. I got notes. So objective ethics, for all intents and purposes, I mean, he's moderately polite besides the insults
Until the
subtle.
mask is off. Yeah.
Until it's pretty subtle. He did good in the terms of like rhetorical style, I think. But where he lost the biggest grip on the conversation was the fact that most of the stuff he was talking about, he made comments out of ignorance. But then again, considering he's an alleged agnostic, I don't expect much else because
he doesn't talk like an agnostic. He's an atheist.
Well, he claims in the debate that like he doesn't decry that a God being could exist, just not the Christian God, because he's a fill in the blank with misogyny or whatever. Like it gets out of hand really quick, but it'd be easier just to go through the notes because I made them specifically for the usage of understanding he did. Oh yeah, it's 3 pages.
Well, all right. Yeah. Well, because I think Buddy Rabbit also watched it. Maybe you two can argue the point.
Oh no, not Buddy Rabbit. There's only room for one animal in this tree.
Okay, it's everybody's least favorite animal avatar. I'm not trying to interrupt you. I was listening.
The rabbit and the unicorn. Let's go. I'll be the squid.
The kraken. I did kind of notes that were more per point and not necessarily probably the most organized. I just did them as they hit, so forgive me if they're not all like packed together because he kind of brought up slavery, we talk about something else and then bring up slavery again. So I just kind of try to address them as they came. But one of the first things I noticed he said is that he blatantly believes that the Bible prescribes everything and doesn't think it can describe anything. So where the Bible states this is how this happened, he thinks that's God saying this is how it must be. Mm-hmm. So when you describe a scene or something of something happening, whether it be through law or whatever, because if Moses says it, it must be from God rather than Moses being the one who does it on his own, kind of a thing, which is how we see stuff go on throughout the Exodus. But for some reason, he thinks there is no descriptions in a historical document, because ultimately the Torah is a historical document from the perspective of the Jews or the Hebrews, whatever term you want to use. And for some reason, he's like, no, like God's prescribing every little detail. And it's like, okay. But even things like, well, I guess we'll get there, but the slavery regulation and whatnot, that's, he thinks God should have just told them not to do it, period. And that's why God can't be, ethical or whatever.
Well, I know Buddy will disagree with me, but that's why I try to cut the legs off that argument.
Well, it's mostly just because it's pretty well known, whether it be in the apologetics community or the ministerial community, that the Bible both prescribes and describes things. It just depends on what they are. But every time God prescribes something, it says, "Thus saith the Lord," specifically. And then there's other times where Moses or another prophet says something of their own accord. and then that's that. So it's a difference between describing it and prescribing things. Another one, he thinks that women had it terrible under God's law, which I had to chuckle. Oh, we lost Buddy.
Bye, Buddy.
He thinks that women had terrible under God's law. Virgin women who were violated, I'm used that safe word, by a man were forced to marry them, and he thinks that's disgusting. And I'm thinking, but why is it that way?
He's got a modern mindset.
Well, that's true. He doesn't actually look at it and say, there's more to this, or here's the cultural context, because in the ancient Near East and Middle East and
no, he doesn't care about cultural context at all. He only thinks through the modernistic lens,
which is one of the points I think. It's like it can't be objective ethics if it doesn't apply universally in every situation. Now
he's very subjective.
There are that's true. There are several instances in which we would say I would find that morally questionable. Like obviously slavery issue is something where modern Christians would be like, we're against slavery as a general rule because people abuse slavery as a tool. You brought Buddy back again. I like how you just sigh. He's like, Buddy's back. Anyway, he doesn't understand that the reason that if a man was to quote unquote violate a woman, that she's not necessarily going to be able to find any support for the rest of her life in that culture because she's considered quote unquote used goods. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't of a good nature, like your husband died and therefore you could potentially remarry. It was of a bad nature, therefore you're kind of like, I don't want to touch that.
Yep.
And in this way, and Matthew pointed out how many shekels, I think it was 50 shekels, which is like 7 years worth of wages and whatnot, is what he claimed. But if that's the case, that means that one, the guy's getting punished. He's basically being fined, but he also, on top of having to pay that to her father, which he has a problem with, or objective ethics has a problem with, on top of that, now he has to marry her and then provide for her the rest of her life, and he loses the ability to divorce her. So the idea is kind of multifaceted, because not only can you not divorce her at the drop of a pin, now you're branded a violator. You're also forced to take care of said woman for the rest of her life, and provided you stay alive as long as she does. And in the worst case scenario, because her father is now 50 shekels, which is 7+ years of an income, should something happen to the guy and she goes back to her father's house, he has the means to take care of her. So it's an economical stipulation, but also it's a punishment on the guy. Because if you have a daughter who gets violated and you have no means to provide for her for the rest of her life, that's not good. Or if you're the sole provider and you die and your wife, her mom, can't provide for her, that's a problem.
Point out, I believe this is the case where she did not cry for help. Right.
If I recall correctly, it doesn't matter.
Because if the guy is found and the girl's calling out for help, he's supposed to be killed.
I think under certain stipulations, yes.
Right. So that's why they say it's like,
I think this is more of the general, just, you're screwed in this.
Well, no, because I think that, the implication of that she didn't cry for help is she's being raped.
Yeah, but all it mentions is the violation aspect. So I'd have to look more into it. But
right,
from what I remember,
they already qualify if she's in common vernacular. If she was raped, you kill the guy.
Well, that's Bubby.
So this isn't rape. This is she went with the guy willingly.
And that may be the case. I'd have to look it up.
Which would mean that they actually liked each other in some sense. It wasn't just some scumbag coming along raping her and
it could have been. It could have been she was sweet talked and the guy.
Well, whatever it is,
had bad plans to basically pump and dump kind of a thing.
Well,
it's the Merchant's Guard theory, where basically the Merchant's Guard come in, she gets falls for him. They have a tumble in the haystack, and then he's like peace and tries to leave. and that's kind of what the law is just like. No, you can't just do that.
You just married me.
You just married me, and I think that's also in a way it's
it's not a modern cultural context where women spread
Sure.
their legs for any Tom, Dick, or Harry that comes by.
Well, it's a specific culture that has this content.
Very highly guarded in that culture. Maybe
well,
not in every culture.
Men valued virginity of their wives,
and so did the women.
Yeah,
right. It was very highly guarded.
I think it's partially it's a punishment, it's a safeguard, but it's also like a hindrance, because if this law's in place, you're like, well, shoot, I don't want to get stuck in this bad situation for me if you're a self-centered person, and I don't want to, end up having to do this. So it may have been a preventative towards people behaving that way out of character.
Yeah, and the problem is you can't. They didn't have like. You'd have to have a law that sort of. And by the way, when you say it's a law, keep in mind that doesn't mean it's like there's no judgment involved. When you have a law in the Old Testament, you bring it before
the elders,
the elders or whoever.
It's the elders of usually the city or whatever
the situation is according to the law, right? It's just like it.
But it would also be severity wise, because this is more like a blanket, like this is a starting point, and then if it's way worse, they will adjust accordingly.
Right. The law is the word. It's adjudicated by people who understand the situation. Just like it works today. Somehow or another, people have this mindset that, well, that's what the law said, and that's just what happens when a thing happens. And it's like, no, it has to be adjudicated. It's just like the law. We have laws on the book. It says it's illegal to do this thing. You bring it before the judge, and they say, okay, well, we understand your circumstances, and so we'll let you go without punishment, or we'll let you do 2 weeks in jail instead of whatever. You know what it is? It's like, it's not the law was not just, oh, look, they just brought him to the law and said, look, you did this thing and this is what happened, so let's do that. No,
well, we also have a different
basis for their judicial system.
We have a very different mentality, because in our modern society and cultures, we think there needs to be an individual law for everything, as opposed to like a baseline.
Right.
It's like when the founding fathers put the Constitution into play, they didn't write out a criminal act and a law for every possible instance. They were like, fraud's bad. Well, that's a pretty broad window. Well, but if you defraud somebody, that's bad. They didn't say, well, if you fraud somebody on this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and this, which is what we do modern wise. We're like, well, if we don't have a legal law for it, because they don't do the education of the elders of the city, or in this case, probably the state. And
even in Moses' day, remember when Jethro came up to him, he's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, all these people have issues with what's happening, and they're coming to me, and I'm spending all day and all night adjudicating their beefs. Yeah. And he's like,
so you try to streamline some of it, but
this is dumb, Moses.
There's a lot of stuff where it's just like the difference in culture and how do we understand, because the worlds and the time periods are entirely different. It's just we make everything so bogged down, which is why like some lawsuits take 10 plus years to get through, because there's just so much backlog and whatnot. It's just ridiculous. But on top of just, he finds that the woman's father, the woman who's violated, her father gets paid the 50 shekels, and he thinks, why not the woman? And it's like, well, because the women didn't have the same like property rights and ability to take care of themselves without having a prior husband or something to gain that status. So
he's thinking through the women's lib lens, which is only 100 years old.
Which is like, okay, but this is good for both the girl and her father, because if something goes wrong and she ends up back with her father because she leaves of her own accord, because the guy loses his ability to divorce her, but she doesn't necessarily lose her ability to divorce him.
Also, you also keep in mind, I can't remember what it is in Judaism, but fathers had to pay a dowry. There was literally a money exchange. So if a daughter is married off to someone, he's supposed to pay a dowry to the suitor, to the husband, right? So it's like
and not to their daughter,
not to the daughter, right? Correct.
I don't know if it's situation though that the father would have to pay a dowry.
No. That's what I'm saying. That punishment is like the reverse of a dowry.
Yeah. Well, it's 7 to 8 years worth of funds. It's
a dowry wasn't a joke, man.
Yeah. Well, no,
And
I'm saying
the
punishment
a point on why Mariology is wrong.
Well,
because
I could go on. I could go on for a long time on Marianne dogmas, but we'll skip that. OE. I just call him OE, but Objective Ethics points to women being told to stay busy at home and obey their husbands, which apparently is bad. And I was like, most women today would kill to stay home and have their husbands go to work.
Well, no, because most women today are brainwashed to think that they need careers.
No. That's a minority amount of people. Because if you go talk to actual people, most of them, like I have coworkers, I work with like 95% women at my job, and almost all of them entirely are like, I wish I could just stay home. And it's like, well, the economy ain't gonna work that way. But anyway, apparently staying home and obeying your husbands. It's like, well, if your husband's main goal in the family unit is to take care of the family, he's going to provide for the family, all that fun jazz. He's listening to him is going to have the best possible outcome for both him and you as the wife. So it logically makes sense for the family unit to operate in this way. Now, if you wanted to,
you can only have one head of a household.
Yeah. And if you want to expand it to Paul, it's like, it's not just women obey your husbands. It's husbands, not necessarily obey, but respect your wives. And you're not just walking all over them roughshod. So it's not a one-way street in that regard.
It's love your wife, and love, it means wanting what is best for your wife. So sometimes maybe your wife isn't doing what is best for herself or for the family. And so who's that? There can only be one head of a household. You can't have a two-headed household.
Yeah. And then he also kind of tie back in with the whole, she didn't get paid, but her dad did. He finds it disturbing that, quote, her value is based on her virginity, end quote, and that she had no autonomy. And it's like, everyone's value was based upon that. Like, if you're a guy and you're sleeping around with 100 million different women, your value is dropped.
So why is that objectively wrong, Mr. Objective Ethics?
That's also another argument if you want to look at the naturalistic view. Yeah. But just from a purely like biblical / ancient cultural context.
I know, but what you're telling me, it just sounds like he's arguing that he finds things wrong himself, which is subjective.
That, or he's part of a group that believes that, and they somehow convinced him that's the true ethics. I don't know where he gets them from, so I can only assume they're from him. But it could also be just he hears the talking points about women complaining that I don't have autonomy to do X, Y, or Z, and it's like, well, a lot of men don't have autonomy to do whatever they want either. So I don't know what to tell you in that regard.
No, dude. No.
But he thinks that he thinks because women had no rights that everything is off the table for morality. And it's like, no, you cannot just go do whatever you want to a woman just because they didn't have the same say when it came to the quote unquote patriarchal system that they had. It was the patriarchal system because they had to do. Yeah, I don't like it. Most people just, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's Objective Ethics' entire argument too.
But it's one of those things where under a patriarchal society, it depends on the values and the rules that they place in that situation. Now, when you look at Israel, it's different than virtually every other nation around. So you're missing a whole lot of context there by just saying the patriarchy, because the patriarchy was literally everywhere at that time. It was not unique to Israel.
And there's nothing wrong with the patriarchy. Let's bring it back.
I mean, yeah, you're not wrong.
Objectively.
Yeah, that too. I had friends that their mom ruled the house and not the dad, and let's just say it never ended well.
Did they turn out trans?
And thankfully, no. Thankfully, they got married and had fantastic.
I knew a family like that down the street when my kids were growing up, and
Hollywood.
Super. No, it was in Portland, of course. So
Great
it's
place.
way ahead of the curve, the curve going down into hell.
They're really far right now.
Yeah, super nice couple. I loved them to death, and their daughter was great and everything. But the mom was like fully like she's the breadwinner, she is the alpha, she was everything. Dad stayed at home. He was actually a cook, and so Dad cooked and cleaned and really took on them, and he was super nurturing. So it's like their roles were literally reversed.
See that I wouldn't call a matriarchy. I'd call that a confused patriarchy.
Right. Well, what happened was her daughter ended up trans, and I'm like, I could totally see that because her daughter identified with that nurturing motherly person who
that
happened
wasn't
to be
her mother.
That wasn't her mother, right?
So she probably grew up not understanding the different roles that people are, and people don't like that they're different.
Well, that's
roles.
the thing, because a girl by nature is nurturing, right? And
it's typically more nurturing than a man. Yeah,
it's that nature, and so that nature was coming from her father, and that is what she identified with. And it's like, all right,
now
that's true trans, not these copycat people who just want to Munchausen by syndrome their children and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Now he jumped back and forth, so I kind of self-adjusted. But when he started talking up slavery, he literally thinks God prescribed slavery, which is verifiably false if you actually read the Bible. Like it's never once said that God said you should be part of slavery. Never once is that a thing. But because the regulations were put on it, and it wasn't God saying don't participate, therefore God prescribed it, is kind of his mentality. He points to verses he doesn't understand and declares that it was the Enlightenment that abolished slavery, as the very heads of the Enlightenment were racist and participated in the slave trade, which is rather ironic. But he believes that Christianity did not abolish slavery. He believes it was very much the Enlightenment.
Does he even know who William Wilberforce is?
I doubt it. But even if he did, it would be like William Wilberforce among a whole bunch of enlightened people. So just because William Wilberforce is the face doesn't have anything to do with Christianity. It was just one dude who's revolting against the Bible or whatever. But the very Christians, he says, use the Bible to okay slavery, because he believes that, like, it was Christians in the South who were trying to confirm slavery and slave trade. And they also did this in Britain too. But the very Christians, he says, they use the Bible to okay slavery, understood the Bible about as much as he did, or does, I guess.
Yeah.
So
my argument of that is obviously that if William Wilberforce and his other Christian abolitionists weren't so good at their job, atheists today would still believe in slavery. Also, if it wasn't for the African slave trade, which everything about the African slave trade was wrong according to the Bible itself, and everyone involved.
You're talking about the transatlantic slave?
Yeah.
Oh, that's coming up. Don't worry.
Everyone involved, aside from the slaves themselves, should have been killed according to the Bible.
Yeah.
And so if
to be fair,
let me make the point.
Oh, sure.
If the African slave trade hadn't existed and been the predominant issue of William Wilberforce's day, I don't know that he would have bothered getting up and saying that slavery should be abolished, because it was so bad. This was the ubiquitous understanding of what slavery was at that time, as opposed to historical slavery going back thousands of years in all the different cultures on the planet. Then I don't know if anybody would have got up and convinced the world and the Western world up until this day so well that slavery is inherently evil, axiomatically evil, that it should be abolished. Because up until then, nobody cared.
I think the Enlightenment benefited way too much from slavery to want to abolish it willingly. They would have to be strong-armed into it, which is ultimately what happened. But I believe it was David Hume and possibly Immanuel Kant were both like hardcore racists and either had ties or directly had slaves to the slave trade. So it's one of those things where, like, they're not going to dip their toes in a war against their own business. So
yeah,
what do you expect?
I just think I think it's funny that Christians were so good at convincing other Christians that slavery was evil, that now even atheists believe that slavery is evil when they never would.
Yes, because we would argue that they get their sense of morality from Christianity, not the other way around.
Yeah. What they consider objective axiomatic evils are what we taught them.
Yeah, it's like we taught you. We're the OG objectivists. What are you talking about? But I thought it was funny because my own line was the whole Christian. He said the very Christians he says use the Bible to okay slavery, understood the Bible as much as he does. So he would make the same argument that the quote unquote Christians from the South would make to maintain slavery.
Mm-hmm.
They understand the Bible as well as he does now, which is not very much by his own words and how he reads the room, so to speak.
Right. Well, obviously, I mean, the Christians in the South weren't reading Exodus. Otherwise, they'd be like, oh, crap, I bought a stolen slave from Africa. I should be put to death.
Well, I mean, one could argue that at that time, they didn't know they were stolen either because it's not like they had newspapers or the internet telling them this stuff. They just knew that they had slaves. Who knows why they're there? Arguably. I'm not saying that's how it was, but I'm just saying you could argue that because the way news travels, because they get on a ship and they come all the way across the pond, the people on the other side may have no idea where these people are coming from. Other than
I think that would be a very bad case of willful ignorance if that's...
Well, I believe it or not, I know people like that today, so it's possible. I'm not saying it's the most likely situation. I'm just saying one could argue that. You'd have to put a lot behind it, but you could argue it.
Yeah, they're like, where are these slaves coming from? And how come they don't seem to want to be slaves?
Well, yes, but also the Bible also has things about getting slaves from war, because if you don't take them after you wipe out their entire existence in that area, they're going to die by themselves. They can't maintain anything. Legally, they wouldn't have any objections.
Well, I know, but that wouldn't have been the women. That would have been like women and children.
Well, also keep in mind
the slaves coming over here, a lot of them were just healthy.
True. Well, I mean, I don't know how much healthy
males, you know?
I don't know how much of them would be healthy, considering the conditions to cross the Atlantic was horrific, and a lot of them wouldn't make it.
But I'm just saying,
sure. But I'm saying like
they would have killed all the males, and they would have saved the women and children from just dying of starvation.
Yeah, but again, that's Israel ancient culture, which obviously even Christians in Britain didn't fully understand, let alone slavery as a known world practice, because everybody did it. And this is like somebody coming to you and say, driving a car is against God's word. You're like, what are you talking about? Like trying to explain to somebody that the system that's been in place forever is now all of a sudden bad is going to be a weird thing for everyone to grasp their heads around. So it's a new concept. We'll say it's like 200 years old of just like, no, we shouldn't be doing this. This is a bad idea. But he also references China, and he says Common Era. I'm going to say BC because I'm a Chad. He mentions that there's this emperor in China that abolished slavery. AD. What was it, 80 or B? I thought
Common Era. CE is AD.
Okay, well, in that case, either way,
maybe
80. Maybe 80. But this emperor abolished slavery. But the actual fact is he didn't actually abolish slavery. He abolished slavery in certain instances, and it didn't last longer than his reign.
No, he's right. He's right. The
guy did it, but it was under certain stipulations. It wasn't a blanket slavery's outlawed.
Right.
It was for certain groups.
Throughout history, a handful of times that certain people, certain places tried to abolish slavery, and it lasted for like 5 minutes.
Well, it was also like, why was it wrong? Was it because it was a moral evil? Well, no, it's just because he felt like it. It's like, okay.
Objective ethics.
I just feel like I should do this. Why? I don't know, because I'm the emperor. But basically, slavery was limited, and then it just went back full swing as soon as the emperor was gone. Let's see. His argument for the transatlantic slave trade is that nobody agreed on what the Bible said, and that it's the Bible's fault, not the people who didn't study it. Which I found extremely interesting, because nobody agreed on what the Bible said is because not everybody studied the Bible. It wasn't even readily available to everybody and not everybody could read, the literacy rate. There's a whole bunch of things. The reason slavery didn't just get abolished when Christianity burst in the open is for a lot of cultural, societal reasons of the day and period. Also because they understood it as normal, so it wouldn't be weird for them to not think of it as immoral or as not normal. But for whatever reason, he's like, oh, well, nobody agreed on this. I'm like, well, did you ask? Did anybody ask for it? Probably not.
All right.
But he also,
so we are over the hour mark. How much longer do you have?
It depends on how much you want to stop me.
Well, I mean, I do have work to do, so it's
okay.
Like,
well,
this, I do an hour.
Well, if we started at the beginning, Mike.
You weren't here at the beginning.
I actually was. I was here 5 minutes in. Yeah, I said hi in the chat, and you just went right past it. And I was like, okay. And I was like, whoa. So I had 15 minutes. Okay.
Well, sorry. Maybe.
Do you want me to burn through it, or do you want me to just wait for another time? It'll be next week.
Yeah, we could continue this tomorrow. I
won't be able to do it tomorrow.
I'm going to try to finish my script tonight. Well, we got Call-In Friday.
I work literally open to close. I won't be able to remember. This is why we do Call-In Mondays. I can do it on Mondays.
We don't do Call-In Mondays.
We do.
No,
we don't do Fridays. It's not unicorn. It's unicornus. Get it right.
Unicornus.
Well, yeah, I have 2 more pages of stuff. But
2 more pages. No, sorry. Thanks everybody for being here.
Well, hey, if we started at the beginning, I would have been done this, but yeah.
No, I don't think so, because you said you had 3 pages and you've been here for more than a half an hour and you've only gone through 1 page.
Because you extend it, Mike. Every time you add a person to the conversation,
I'm not gonna sit here and let you freaking diatribe.
No. I'm not saying just let me diatribe. I'm just saying, like, you know how to draw things out, literally and metaphorically.
I chase squirrels. Okay.
I know, and I tried to run the squirrels back to the highway, but you kept pulling them off the road.
No, sorry. If you want to finish this up some other time, we'll figure it out.
Sure.
All right.
Monday through
Thanks
Wednesday.
everybody for being here. Justin, the Unicornus. God bless us, everyone. Like, subscribe, share, hit the Discord. Tina's got the Discord up there if you want to continue the conversation. And until next time, bye.
Yo, bye.